Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling what feels like the Everest of human interaction, really, the crucial conversation.
Yeah, those moments where everything feels like it's on the line.
Exactly. So our mission today, for you listening in, is to unpack the secrets, if you will, of handling those dialogues when the stakes are just incredibly high.
Opinions are all over the place, emotions are running strong.
And getting it wrong feels like it could have serious consequences. We're going to try and move past the simple tips and techniques today.
Right. We want to dive deeper, straight into the foundational stuff, the character requirements, the cultural bedrock needed for success.
Because conventional advice, it often misses the mark in these moments, doesn't it?
It really does. We tend to focus on the external,
Yeah.
like what's the perfect phrase? How should I structure my points? But what our sources keep showing us
Yeah.
is that the real work, the heavy lifting for successful high-stakes communication, it starts way deeper, internally first,
Yeah.
with self-mastery.
And then culturally, right? By building that almost unconditional trust.
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
So our framework today, it's really centered on things like integrity, trust, transparency, because you absolutely need those foundations. No tactic works without them.
It makes me think of that quote from Charles Kettering, the inventor.
Oh, yeah. Which one?
A problem well stated is a problem half solved. And I think that points to the first huge mistake we make in these conversations.
Which is?
Assuming that just because we're talking, maybe even arguing heatedly, we're actually solving the right problem. Often we're just, spinning our wheels on symptoms.
That's spot on. If we haven't really nailed down the core issue, and that usually comes down to misaligned motives or maybe unchecked emotions,
Yeah.
the source material basically warns us you'll just end up having the same frustrating conversation again.
Yeah.
Again, wasting energy, damaging relationships. It's draining.
So you've got to start inside first. That's what the methodology says. You have to really rigorously examine your own motives. They call it start with heart, right?
Exactly. Start with heart. And then, crucially, learn to manage your own emotional reactivity. That's the master my stories part. It's about the narrative you tell yourself.
Okay, let's start right there then. That internal preparation. Because that first crucial mistake, misdiagnosing the problem, it happens all the time. We think the topic is the barrier, we just disagree about the budget, but maybe the real obstacle is, well, our own internal state or our hidden motives.
Right. So the very first step is choosing the right conversation to even have. And that means acknowledging you've got to do the internal work first, starting with heart, mastering your story.
Because if you walk into one of these high-stakes talks focused purely on, say, winning, or proving the other person wrong, or just saving face.
You've basically already lost, haven't you?
Yeah, you've pretty much guaranteed failure before you even start. Your internal motives, they just leak out.
They do, unconsciously, through your body language, your tone, your word choices, and the other person picks up on it instantly. They get defensive.
So that internal work, it determines whether you're even capable of seeking genuine mutual understanding, which is, fundamental for interdependence.
And that concept, interdependence, it's really worth unpacking.
Yeah.
It leads us straight to the idea of the maturity continuum.
Okay, walk us through that because it's such a powerful way to think about personal growth and why it's essential for communication, why you can't just leapfrog to teamwork.
Sure. So the continuum maps our journey, essentially.
Yeah.
We start independence. That's relying on others for everything, for our results, maybe our feelings. Think childhood.
Okay.
Then we move, ideally, to independence. That's being self-reliant, inner-directed. You get results through your own efforts. You take responsibility.
The sort of rugged individualist idea, maybe?
Kind of, yeah. But the journey doesn't stop there. The highest level is interdependence. That's where you consciously choose to combine your efforts with other independent people to achieve something greater than any of you could alone.
Okay, but here's the catch, right? The crucial insight for dialogue.
Exactly. Interdependence. That synergistic collaboration, it's a choice that only independent people can actually make.
Why is that?
Because dependent people, they lack the necessary character base. They don't have the inner security, the confidence to engage as true equals. They're always worried.
Worried about what they might lose or what the other person can do for them or to them.
Precisely. They can't be vulnerable enough or secure enough for real collaboration. So independence is the foundation for interdependence.
It sounds like the law of the harvest, but applied to, how we work together.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
You absolutely cannot reap the public victories. Things like teamwork, effective communication, cooperation, which the framework calls habits 4, 5, and 6.
Right. Win-win. Seek first to understand, synergize.
Exactly. You can't get those until you've paid the price, done the work for the private victories of self-mastery.
And for anyone less familiar, those private victories, habits 1, 2, and 3, are things like being proactive, not reactive.
Mm-hmm.
Taking responsibility. It's me. Beginning with the end in mind. So knowing your values and goals.
Having that personal mission.
And putting first things first, which is about integrity and execution, doing what matters most. You just can't expect good public dialogue if you haven't planted and tended your own garden first.
We should probably clarify what a habit even means here. It's not just like brushing your teeth automatically.
Right, it's deeper.
Much deeper. A tree habit, in this sense, is where 3 things intersect, and they're all within our control, which is empowering.
Okay, what are the 3?
First is knowledge. That's the what to do, and critically the why. Why does this principle matter? Second is skill. That's the how to do it, the actual competence.
Got it. Knowledge and skill.
And the third, which often gets overlooked, is desire. That's the motivation, the want to do it. You've got to actually want to be proactive or understand others.
So you need all 3 pulling together, the what and why, the how, and the want to.
Exactly. That's how you internalize principles and build the kind of character strength you need to stay steady when the pressure cooker environment of a crucial conversation heats up.
And that internal strength, that steadiness, it becomes absolutely vital when we hit conflict or, emotional pain. The sources give us this really direct formula for growth in those moments, almost like algebra.
It's incredibly powerful in its simplicity. Pain plus reflection.
Progress. Pain plus reflection equals progress. Okay.
Think about it. When we feel emotional, pain, frustration, anger, disappointment during a tough conversation or after a failure, our first instinct, our sort of animal brain.
Yeah, the fight or flight thing.
Exactly. Fight or flight kicks in. We want to blame someone else, get defensive, or maybe just withdraw completely, shut down.
But that doesn't lead to progress.
No. Progress requires something uniquely human, self-reflectiveness. That reflection part of the formula forces us to pause, calm down, and actually analyze the reality behind the pain.
So asking things like, why am I reacting so strongly? What's really going on here? What assumption am I making?
Precisely. What weakness in myself or what reality am I struggling to accept? That's the difference between real reflection, which leads to learning, and just unproductive rumination.
Which is just looping the pain, right? Feeling bad without finding the lesson.
Exactly. It reminds me of those powerful stories, individuals like Viktor Frankl in the concentration camps. He anchored himself internally. His commitment to rewriting his lost manuscript, that gave him meaning, a reason to endure unimaginable external horror. It shows how an internal anchor can stop external forces from dictating your response.
And that anchor, that internal stability, it's built brick by brick, isn't it? Through commitment.
Yes, the sources are really clear on this.
Yeah.
The simple act of making and keeping commitments, even small private promises to yourself, that's what builds inner integrity.
Like saying you'll get up 15 minutes earlier and then actually doing it.
Exactly. It seems minor, but each kept promise strengthens that muscle of self-trust. And over time, your honor, your commitment to your values, it becomes greater than our moods, as the source puts it.
I like that phrase, greater than our moods.
It means when the stakes get high, your emotions don't hijack the situation, your fear, your anger, your defensiveness. They don't sabotage the dialogue before it even gets going because you've built that foundation of self-trust.
Now, if we push this idea of internal anchoring to its maybe philosophical limit, we end up in some really interesting territory. Concepts describing a mind that's totally unshaken by anything external, like transcendental consciousness from the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah, that takes self-mastery to a whole other level, a spiritual or philosophical stability. The Gita talks about achieving this state when you give up chasing immediate sense gratification.
Like fleeting pleasures or avoiding discomfort?
Exactly. Things that arise from, as it says, mere mental concoction. Instead, you find satisfaction within the self. In a modern sense, you could see this as ultimate inner resilience, moving beyond being yanked around by every little emotional demand or external event.
And the person who reaches this state is described as being in perfect knowledge.
Okay.
What does that look like practically, say, for a leader or negotiator facing ups and downs?
It means they're steady. They're firmly fixed in understanding, so they're not thrown off balance by getting good or bad news. by success or failure.
So they don't get overly excited by a win or crushed by a loss.
Right. They neither praise the good outcomes excessively nor despise the bad ones. They're seen as being above the duality of the material world, heat cold, happiness misery, profit loss, praise criticism.
That sounds incredibly valuable in a high-stakes environment.
Immensely. Imagine a critical project gets canceled suddenly. This leader maintains composure. Or they land a huge, unexpected deal. They don't get complacent or overly giddy. They just do their work honestly. Are satisfied with what comes, remain internally independent. They're basically unshakable in the storm's eye.
And it's that kind of unshakable person who's actually ready for the next step we need to talk about,
Yeah.
radical truth-telling. That's a perfect transition, because that internal stability of the individual, it has to come before you can have stability in a team or an organization.
Makes sense. If you're internally fragile or insecure, you simply can't handle difficult truths. You certainly can't practice radical transparency.
So moving from that personal integrity to the health of the group, the sources really hammer home that facing hard truths isn't just like a nice moral idea. It's actually about efficiency.
Yeah, Ray Dalio's whole concept of the idea of meritocracy at Bridgewater is built on this. Radical truth and radical transparency are the pillars.
Explain that a bit more. Radical truth and transparency.
It demands that everyone in the organization is open about their real thoughts, their mistakes, their weaknesses, even, or maybe especially, when it's uncomfortable or awkward.
Why? What's the argument for that level of openness?
Dalio argues, pretty convincingly I think, that it's just immensely inefficient to work somewhere where people hide what they really think. Maybe to avoid conflict, maybe to protect egos, maybe just office politics.
So radical truth is about letting facts and logic win out.
Right. And radical transparency means making things observable so people can see for themselves. You combine those with believability-weighted decision-making, basically, weighing opinions based on track records, and you get a system designed to find the best ideas no matter who they come from.
And what's the flip side? What's the actual, maybe even quantifiable cost when you don't have that transparency? We know fear cultures are expensive.
Oh, the cost is massive, but often hidden. It's what the psychologist Bob Keegan calls the two jobs.
The two jobs.
Yeah. In most organizations, people aren't just doing their actual job description. They're also working a second, often more exhausting job, managing everyone else's impression of how they're doing their job.
Ah, the looking good job.
Exactly. All that energy spent worrying, hiding mistakes, spinning failures, making sure you look competent and in control. It's incredibly draining.
And transparency just removes that layer.
It aims to. It removes the need for that wasteful second job. It allows people to bring their authentic selves, focus their energy on the actual mission, not on impression management.
You know, this connects directly back to classical ethics, like Cicero writing centuries ago. He wasn't talking about corporate efficiency, but about societal health.
Absolutely. Cicero saw every lie, every violation of truth as a direct stab at the health of human society, just fundamentally corrosive.
Whereas openness invites more openness.
Yes, he believed frankness invites frankness, building trust across the board. And his core ethical rule was just uncompromising. Nothing unjust can ever be truly expedient or useful in the long run.
That's a high bar.
It is. He basically said the wise person wouldn't even dare to think anything they wouldn't be willing to say out loud publicly. It's a radical call for honesty, whether you're running a country, a company, or just managing a small team. The right thing always has to trump what seems easy or immediately beneficial.
He uses this incredibly stark example from Roman history to illustrate this, doesn't he? About Regulus and those soldiers after the disaster at Cannae. It really shows how trying to be clever with the truth just makes things worse.
It's a powerful story.
Yeah.
Rome had suffered this catastrophic defeat. Carthage sends 10 captured Roman soldiers back to the Senate to negotiate a prisoner exchange. They go under a solemn oath. If the Senate refuses, they'll return to the Carthaginian camp.
Okay, high stakes.
Very. The Senate refuses the deal. 9 of the 10 soldiers honor their oath and start heading back to captivity. But one guy gets clever.
Oh boy.
He leaves the group, quickly ducks back into the Roman camp for a moment, claiming he forgot something, and then rejoins the others. Later, he argues that this brief return technically fulfilled his oath, so he could stay safely in Rome.
He tried to find a loophole in his oath to return.
Exactly. And Cicero and the Roman censors at the time absolutely condemned it. They said flatly that this kind of deceit aggravates perjury instead of annulling it.
Wait, why does deceit aggravate it, make it worse?
Because the initial oath was maybe made under duress, you could argue. But the calculated deception, the sneaky attempt to find a technicality that revealed a fundamental lack of character, a willingness to twist words to avoid responsibility.
So what seemed expedient to him escaping capture just paled in comparison to doing the right, honorable thing.
Completely. And the Roman authorities agreed. They stripped him of his rights as a citizen and sent him back to Hannibal in chains. The message was clear. Honor and morality are non-negotiable even when your life is on the line.
Wow. That intensity about truth-telling, it has direct parallels in how modern leaders should handle debate, doesn't it? Especially this idea of dominating versus facilitating.
It really does. In the multipliers framework, leaders who act as diminishers, the ones who shut down intelligence, are often described as those who dominate the discussion. They become debaters, not debate makers.
Meaning they argue to win rather than argue to find the best answer.
Precisely. They might gather smart people, collect data, but then they stifle a truly rigorous debate because ultimately their voice is the loudest, or they cut things short, they shut down the collective intelligence they supposedly assembled.
But hold on, isn't a leader sometimes supposed to make the call? Cut off debate to meet a deadline, especially when stakes are high and time is short? Where's the line between necessary decisiveness and just being dominant?
That's the crucial distinction. Necessary decisiveness comes after the leader has actively ensured all the key viewpoints have been heard, have been rigorously tested, maybe even argued forcefully. Then they make the call and, ideally, explain the why. Dominance, on the other hand, is when the leader forces a decision prematurely. Maybe they rely too heavily on their own initial, strongly stated opinion, or they shortcut the debate simply because they're impatient, or maybe they're just uncomfortable with the conflict and tension that real debate generates.
And that sends a clear signal to the team.
A terrible signal. It says the leader's ego or their comfort level matters more than finding the actual best idea. And you can bet that the next time a tough problem comes up, people won't engage as fully. Why bother if the leader's just going to railroad their own opinion through anyway?
So if that lack of transparency and real debate breeds inefficiency, then the next level down, actual secrecy and needing to be in absolute control, that breeds fear. And fear is just toxic, right? Especially in creative or problem-solving work.
Oh, it's deadly. Sources like Ed Catmull from Pixar talk a lot about this. Fear just runs rampant in places where managers prioritize being seen as perfectly in control. They hate surprises.
So what happens? Employees start managing the manager.
Exactly. They start anticipating the manager's reactions. You get the rise of the dreaded pre-meeting before the meeting.
Ah, yes. Where the real discussion happens.
Right. The messy, honest discussion happens in secret, offline, so that by the time the official meeting occurs, everything is polished, safe, palatable, no surprises for the boss.
So the employee's walking on eggshells and the official meeting is just theater.
Pretty much. Pro forma. A complete waste of everybody's time and intelligence. It's all driven by the underlying fear.
And the antidote to that kind of fear, according to Creativity Inc., is trust. But it's a specific kind of trust they're talking about, isn't it?
It is. Trust is the best weapon against fear, even if they aren't perfect opposites. Trusting people doesn't mean you expect them never to make mistakes.
Right. That's unrealistic.
Totally. It means trusting that when mistakes inevitably happen, people will step up. They'll take responsibility, they'll act with integrity to help fix the problem, not hide it.
And leaders have to earn that trust.
Absolutely. They demonstrate trustworthiness over time. And the single biggest way they do that is by how they respond to failure.
So if a leader punishes failure,
They breed secrecy and fear. People will hide problems until they explode.
but if they treat failure as a chance to learn,
They encourage transparency. People feel safe to bring problems forward early when they're still small and manageable.
this loops right back to candor again. If a manager's default mode is secrecy, keeping information close to the vest,
They're sending an implicit message. I don't trust you with this, even if it directly affects your work. It makes people feel like outsiders.
whereas being candid, even with tough news or challenging data,
Signals trust. It tells employees, I trust you with the full picture. It gives them a sense of ownership over the information and over the problem itself.
and interestingly, the source material suggests that when people feel trusted like that, they're actually less likely to leak sensitive stuff.
It sounds counterintuitive, but it makes sense. When the secrecy is gone, the need to gossip or speculate diminishes. And the fear of the unknown, which often drives leaks, is reduced because people feel like they're in the loop.
There's that incredible, detailed story about the cost of a culture focused on error prevention above all else. The anecdote about the Disney animation movie Bolt, right after the Pixar merger, it really crystallizes the paralyzing effect of fear.
Oh, that was a huge cultural moment. The production team ran into a major technical snag with one of the animated characters, Rhino the hamster, a rigging problem.
And the initial estimate from the managers to fix it
A
was
staggering 6 months.
6 months
Yeah.
for character rig.
Yeah. And why? Because the institutional fear inherited from the pre-Pixar Disney culture meant that the leaders valued preventing any possible future error more than they valued quickly solving the current problem.
So the 6-month timeline wasn't about the actual work, but about building in buffers against any conceivable mistake.
Exactly. It was designed to deliver a character rig that was 100% bulletproof. Zero chance of failure, no matter how long it took or how much it delayed the film. It was pure fear-based planning.
But that timeline was totally out of whack with what the team could actually do.
Completely disconnected. While the bureaucracy was projecting this massive delay, 3 specialized rigging guys who were thankfully empowered by a manager who trusted them.
Yeah.
They just took it upon themselves over a weekend. They jumped in, experimented, bypassed all the red tape, focused on error prevention, and just attacked the problem directly.
And the result?
The problem was essentially solved within days. The whole project was back on track within a week. It was a massive wake-up call.
Showing that trying to eliminate failure entirely is usually the wrong approach.
Absolutely. It's fear-driven and paralyzing. The culture had to shift. It had to become okay to try things, to solve problems proactively, even if the first attempt wasn't perfect. The focus had to move from finding the theoretically right way to just getting the actual fix done.
And when you empower people like that to actually fix the problem, it demands a big shift from the leader, doesn't it? From being the commander barking orders.
To being more of a coach, facilitating success. We see this really clearly in high-stakes places like the military, surprisingly.
Tell me about that, the team of teams example.
Yeah, a military leader operating in that complex, fast-moving environment realized that the old model, waiting for his approval on every decision, just wasn't working. It was too slow. It didn't lead to better decisions within the needed time frame. It just caused delays.
So what did he do?
He radically changed his role. He stopped being the bottleneck, waiting for reports and giving approvals. Instead, he focused on constantly communicating his thought process, his intent, the why behind the mission.
Not the specific how.
Exactly. And then he empowered the teams below him to make the calls, to execute based on their understanding of his intent and the situation on the ground.
Did it work?
Amazingly well. The decisions made lower down were often the same ones he would have made, but they happened much faster. It empowered the team, increased tempo exponentially. And crucially, he always retained ultimate responsibility. He owned the outcomes.
So how does that translate into, say, a business setting, managing for the future?
It means shifting from being a taskmaster who primarily judges past performance, often critically, to being a coach and mentor focused on enabling future success.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine you've got a product head who's been really indecisive, maybe stuck between 2 strategic options for weeks, causing delays.
Okay.
The old model might be to criticize them for waffling. The coaching model focuses on the future behavior. The manager might say, okay, let's analyze how we can approach this kind of decision more decisively next time. What if we agree that you'll lay out the top 2 options, analyze the pros and cons rigorously, but then explicitly state your preferred path to the team sooner?
So it reframes it completely. Focus on improvement, not blame.
Exactly. It builds skills for the future, instead of just dwelling on past mistakes. And that reinforces psychological safety, making people more willing to take smart risks.
Now, we have to touch on the most extreme end of the spectrum. Situations where high stakes meet a complete structural impossibility of trust or transparency, where there's just an absence of justice. The writings of Frederick Douglass paint a truly chilling picture here, a stark contrast to all these organizational ideals we've been discussing.
His account of being brutally assaulted by white ship carpenters in Baltimore is terrifying. A completely unprovoked, vicious attack.
And when he sought legal recourse,
He went with his master, Hugh Auld, to the local magistrate, Esquire Watson. And Watson essentially told him his hands were tied. He couldn't issue an arrest warrant.
why not?
Because under the law at the time, the testimony of a black person, even 1,000 black people, was inadmissible against a white person. They needed a white witness willing to testify, and none would.
So the system itself was designed to deny him any standing, any voice, any path to justice through dialogue or law.
It's the ultimate failure of high-stakes interaction. where the entire framework for communication, for redress, simply doesn't exist for one party. It's structurally blocked.
And Douglas points out that even moments of human kindness couldn't fix it. Master Hugh was outraged by the attack. His formerly cruel mistress showed pity.
But their fleeting emotions, their personal feelings, were powerless against the established system, the structure of power. They felt bad, but they couldn't change the outcome within that system.
And the result for Douglas, the consequence of this total denial.
He realized his only chance for life, his only path forward, was in flight. When dialogue is structurally impossible, communication ends. Survival becomes the only goal.
That Douglas account is just horrifying, and it really underscores what happens when the very possibility of dialogue is removed. The game changes completely. It's not about communication anymore. It's pure survival.
Right. And in situations like that, or even less extreme ones where justice isn't available or perhaps the opponent is just overwhelmingly strong, the focus has to shift. It's less about winning the argument and more about strategic survival, maneuver, maybe finding a different battlefield.
Sun Tzu actually has specific advice for this, doesn't he, when dealing with what he calls contentious ground.
He does. And his advice is all about strategic caution. Contentious ground is basically territory that's equally advantageous or disadvantageous for both sides to hold. It's likely to be fiercely contested.
So what's the guidance?
If the enemy has already gotten there first, if they hold the advantage on that contentious ground, Sun Tzu warns you, beware of attacking directly. He calls it sheer madness sometimes.
Why? Because the cost might be too high.
Exactly. The cost of winning might outweigh the benefit, and your chances of actually succeeding might be low anyway. It's just not smart to fight them head on there.
Okay, so if a direct assault on the contentious point is unwise, what's the alternative strategy in a high-stakes negotiation or conflict?
You have to maneuver them off that ground, rather than trying to push them off directly. The smart strategy is to lure them away.
How?
Sun Tzu suggests things like feigning retreat, using distractions, banners and drums in his day, maybe misinformation, or focusing on other issues in ours to confuse their analysis of your real strength and intentions.
Okay, create confusion, and then?
Then you make a sudden dash for someplace else that they cannot afford to lose, something vital to them, that forces them to abandon the contentious ground to protect this other, more critical point.
So, metaphorically, in a tough negotiation, if your opponent has dug in on some point of principle where you know you can't win, you don't just keep banging your head against that wall. You strategically retreat from that point, maybe muddy the waters a bit, and then redirect the entire conversation to an area where they are vulnerable, or where the consequences of their inaction are suddenly much higher for them. You change the battlefield. That's strategic thinking, focusing on maneuver and maybe delay. It also applies in smaller conflicts, right, where just gaining time can be a form of victory. Clausewitz talked about this with small war.
He did. Clausewitz pointed out that in irregular warfare, the defender often gains a crucial advantage: time. The attacker, especially a larger, more conventional force, has to stop and think.
They have to analyze the situation.
Right. Analyze the defender's dispersed positions, develop a complex plan to counter it, form up their columns for attack. All these actions take time. They delay the pursuit.
And that delay can be fatal for the attacker.
It can be crippling, especially against a resilient, decentralized opponent. It suggests that in many high-stakes interactions, if you can't match your opponent's force or resources, maybe you can counter with complexity, with decentralization, with planned delay, actions that force them to slow down and become potentially paralyzed by their own structured approach.
Okay, let's bring this all back home, back to that internal mastery we started with. Because underlying all this strategy is the need for wisdom, for that internal steadiness that lets you navigate conflict without being destroyed by it. Lao Tzu has that powerful line about knowledge and silence.
Yeah, in the Tao Te Ching, who knows doesn't talk. Who talks doesn't know. It points towards a kind of deep knowledge that isn't about winning arguments, but about achieving a state of inner, deep sameness, as it's sometimes translated.
Deep sameness, meaning what, practically speaking, not being pulled around by opposites.
Exactly, a state where you're not controlled by the endless push and pull of duality. You're not driven solely by the need for love, or by rejection.
Or by chasing profit or by loss.
Or by the ego's hunger for praise, or by humiliation. When you reach that kind of inner stillness, where external events don't dictate your internal state, Lao Tzu says you attain honor under heaven.
It's a perspective that almost transcends the conflict itself. You act from principle, not just reacting to the latest emotional trigger.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Ralph Waldo Emerson touches on something similar, suggesting that our practical outward well-being, what he calls prudence, and our inner virtue, our heroism or holiness rooted in the soul, they aren't opposites. They can actually be reconciled.
How so?
He argues that managing outward things effectively, including navigating difficult situations successfully, ultimately rests on a just apprehension of their cause and origin.
Meaning you can't fix the external problem if you don't understand its deep, maybe internal roots.
Exactly. Outward success, true effectiveness, especially in complex human interactions, only really matters and only really lasts if it comes from a place of inner wisdom, fundamental understanding, and solid character. At the end of the day, the truly good, self-mastered person will also be the truly wise and effective person. Hashtag tag outro.
Well, this has been quite a deep dive. It feels like the big takeaway is that navigating these high-stakes interactions successfully, it's fundamentally less about having the perfect script or the killer rebuttal.
Much less.
And profoundly more about having, well, an almost unshakable character. It demands that fierce internal self-mastery we talked about.
And then building on that, the ethical and practical need for radical candor over secrecy and fear, plus the strategic wisdom to know when to engage, how to engage, and maybe even when to retreat to fight another day.
We've gone from ancient philosophy to modern business leadership, military strategy.
And yeah, a really clear theme just keeps emerging, doesn't it, before you even think about managing the conflict out there in the room.
You have to rigorously manage yourself, your motives, your emotions, the story you're telling yourself.
That's the starting point.
Yeah.
Always.
Which leads us perfectly into a final, maybe provocative thought for you, the listener. This one comes from cognitive science, actually.
Oh, interesting. Where are we going with this?
Well, we often assume conflict comes from, bad logic or people just having genuinely different facts or goals. Simple disagreement. But the source material, drawing on Daniel Kahneman's work on our mental systems, specifically System 1, that fast, intuitive, gut reaction mind.
Yeah, the autopilot mind.
Right. It suggests there might be a deeper, maybe more insidious problem at play in these difficult conversations.
Which is?
System 1, Kahneman says, has this incredibly strong bias. It wants to believe that whatever it sees, whatever limited information it has, is consistent and coherent. It jumps to conclusions.
Weaves a story quickly.
Exactly. It instantly creates a narrative, a representation of reality that, crucially, makes too much sense to the person holding it. It just feels right. It hates ambiguity. It favors certainty over doubt.
Okay, I see where you're going.
So if our minds are basically hardwired to construct these overly rich, overly certain, overly coherent pictures based on what might be pretty scant or ambiguous evidence, then how much of the difficulty, the gridlock, the frustration in crucial conversations stems not from actual malice or even real differences in reasoned opinion,
but simply from the collision of two separate, internally consistent, self-constructed realities. Two realities that each make perfect sense to the individual holding them, but are fundamentally incompatible.
If that's even partly true, it changes everything, doesn't it?
It really does. Because if that's the case, then the real challenge in any crucial conversation might not be about winning the argument. It's not about proving your reality is the objectively correct one.
What is it then?
Maybe the real deeper challenge is about dissolving certainty. First, the certainty of your opponent, finding ways to introduce doubt gently. But perhaps even more importantly,
dissolving the certainty of your own internal story.
Exactly. Creating space for doubt, for curiosity, for the possibility that your coherent picture is missing something vital. Only when that certainty cracks on both sides can true constructive dialogue even begin.
Dissolving certainty, not winning arguments. That is definitely something to reflect on next time you feel absolutely positively sure you are right in a disagreement.